Now, of course, I mentioned there was a junior day this weekend, but the most important thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet because everything else has happened is Penn State got a commit this past weekend. And after watching a little bit of this, you're going to see some of the film here on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you're listening on a podcast on any of these, I always encourage you to go and check out the highlights of the prospects and the things we put up here because, whoo boy, Fitz, Julian Peterson. Tell me about what you know about Julian Peterson, the latest Nittany Lion in the class of 2026.
Julian Peterson, a cornerback from South Jersey, plays for Bill Belton. You may remember his name, former Penn State running back. He's now coaching at Winslow Township. Penn State's been pretty active with Belton's kids in the past. This is the first, well, I guess this is the second commit. Johnny Shakir committed to Penn State a couple of years ago as a wide receiver, was at another school and then transferred to Bill Belton's school. And then actually Penn State parted ways with him. Belton was actually a part of that. Just I think Penn State probably dodged a bullet in that manner. But you look at Julian Peterson, that's an interesting one because this is a guy that's been to campus several times. He's camped for Penn State. So they've got the athletic triangle numbers and things like that. And those look really, really good.
Yeah.
He came to the SMU playoff game on his own dime, which I think the more we talk about this cycle, the more we're going to look at those guys and say, hey, that's genuine, interest in getting there and making it happen and buying your own parking, all that kind of stuff that comes together. So,
yeah.
So when he committed this weekend, looking back on the hindsight, not a major surprise. I'm not going to lie. We were caught a bit off guard when we found out Sunday that it was probably going to go down. I was actually writing up a piece that was going to go out and never made it because Julian Peterson beat us to the punch here. But you look at what he brings to the table, and I mentioned it on the board. He's like a 3D printed version of Joey Porter. He is like as close to 6'2" as you can get. I don't have the updated numbers from this weekend, but like he's not a 6 foot 6'2". He's a 6'2", 6'2", which is good to have. Ran a 4.48 at camp last year, had a shuttle in the 4.3. So athletically, biologically, like the length and everything like that is a prototypical new age cornerback. I think his film, it's good. It's solid. It's not a situation like last year when you had Omari Gaines. You looked at the film and you're like, I don't know if he can play here. I think Peterson can fit in here on that practice field, on the game field, and things like that. So I think there's a lot to like about him. I still think he's got to make strides, on the football field, which is obviously the be all end all here. But 6'2" corner that can run in the 4.4s, you're probably going to, raise some eyebrows at that. So Peterson, a good fit in that manner. And, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I mentioned the Joey Porter thing, and they're like, well, you look at Joey Porter's junior film, it's not particularly great. And okay, so here we are comparing Julian Peterson to Joey Porter, which is exactly what I didn't want to do. But you look at, like, if you're creating a player, if you're looking at the frame, there's a lot of similarities there. So very encouraged to see the direction that he's going to keep going in. And going back to what I said, earlier about can he fit in athletically, a 4.48 at 6'2" is flying. So I'm very, very curious to see how this one plays out. I think probably high 3 stars where we have him. And I think that's probably about right now. 87 on 3, number 28 corner nationally on the on 3 industry rankings. So a very interesting take at this point in time, just because we haven't really talked a ton about him, but there's a lot to like there, and there's a lot of upside on the back end with Julian Peterson. So excited to watch him grow. And again, if you show that kind of interest in getting to a playoff game on your own dime, there's certainly, something to be said for that. So I'm very curious to see how that this one plays out in the long run. And I think it goes back to the rest of the class. You look at the number of guys that they can take with the still proposed, not approved, expansion to 105 scholarships / roster limit. And you probably have more reason to take a guy like Julian Peterson at this point than you probably would have had in past years. So again, excited to see him grow. There's a lot of tools there. There's a lot of boxes that are checked. He's just going to continue to have to improve as a football player. And I think he's a guy that a lot of people were interested in.
Yeah, you had me at 6'2", 4 in running in the 4.4s.
Yeah,
there are two with the other numbers too. I think, as you mentioned, some of the explosive numbers, because you can be big, fast, and linear, and that's not a good cornerback. Right. But to change directions and have the ability to play running back in high school, you saw there in the highlights, like the athletic profile when you don't have any of those blemishes. And the only one I would say is in terms of the comparison to Joey Porter Jr. is his arms are a little short, but also Joey Porter Jr. was a condor. He had the wingspan of a pterodactyl,
of a DN. Yeah, he was a 34-inch guy at the combine. Like, that's, I don't know where that fits in over the last 10 years, but it's got to be top 5% or something
Yeah.
of that nature. So not as long, but long enough. And I think Joey spoiled that for everybody moving forward when you take a tall corner.
Yeah, but the building blocks I think are super important as you mentioned, and it's the ability at 180 pounds and the way he plays. I think in terms of the physical side of the game, he probably has a little more than Joey going on right now in terms of the way he attacks the ball and some of the things from a size perspective. I texted Fitz before the show and I'm like, he is a corner, right? Because I could see him growing into a safety size player, and Penn State loves these kind of tweeners, a guy that maybe could play in the slot at one point in terms of just, I don't see a problem with him tackling. Now, that is something that has to play out over time, but we're talking here, junior film for a corner athlete. What can you do in terms of that? So here we have, just to point out Fitz's the comment about the class of 2026. Just a quick refresher: Kevin Brown, Messiah Mickens, Troy Hune, Matt Sieg, Daniel Jennings, Jasir Rogers, Jaquaden Guilford. Now, Julian Peterson is the first defensive back other than Matt Sieg in the class, the first corner. Just to get on the board with some of the other guys that they have. To me, like when that's your baseline of that physical ability, I think it's super promising for this class in 2026 to be one of those top 10 classes eventually, if he's able to develop the game on the other side, given Penn State's in on a lot of top prospects as well. Do you?
Yeah.
Really?
If you look at the corners that Penn State's brought in, like there's no particular prototype for that, because last year they brought in John Mitchell, who was in the middle in terms of height. They brought Belgrave Shorter, is a little bit taller, a little bit thicker, and he's already at safety. Then you got Kenny Woosley, who was a little bit shorter in the slot. So and Xavier Thomas as well. So there's no like you have to be 6'1", 6'2" to get this done. You can take those guys, for lack of a better term, stash them, because it's going to take them a little bit longer to develop and to feel out really the speed and quickness of the college game. That's going to be the biggest thing. I mean, if you're 6'2", if you're tall kid, it's going to take longer for you to walk and chew gum, and that's certainly natural. And Joey Porter redshirted his first year. Like he came and started as a redshirt freshman because of that adjustment period. And on top of that, if you're in this 105 world where you have the ability to take more guys at a singular position, or guys at a position in this case where you eventually lose some to safety, just natural attrition there, then you can take a flyer on a guy that's 6'2" and 4'4" and feel pretty good about it. So I think that they feel pretty good about this one.